Stepsister drugged me, lied to my family, and almost got us all. At exactly 2:30 p.m., I watched them lower the coffin into the ground, the air thick with rain and soot, so when I noticed Betty standing across from me, smirking. That same smirk she used when she lied to the police, when she spread rumors that I was unstable, when she almost got us all. The smell of wet soil mixed with the faint hospital disinfectant still clinging to my clothes. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even breathe. Because this funeral wasn't just for the dead, it was for every part of my life she destroyed. To understand how we got here, you'd have to go back 2 years to the night my mother's lasagna was still warm on the table and we were still pretending to be a family. Before the witness protection betrayal. Before the lies. Before I learned that sometimes your own blood can poison you quietly. I used to think Betty was just lonely. After the Mom remarried late, she was 62, still sharp as a knife, but soft in the way only women who have survived too much can be. Her new husband, Richard, brought along Betty, 28, charming, always too polished for our small Virginia town. She called me little sister like it was a joke. That night, Mom was fussing over her lasagna, muttering about how the sauce didn't taste right. "Scarlett, grab the parmesan from the pantry, will you?" she said. I remember Betty leaning against the counter, scrolling on her phone, her tone sweet as syrup. "So, Scarlett, still working at the pharmacy?" "Yeah," I said, wiping my hands. "Just trying to save up for my nursing program." "That's cute," she said, smiling. "You always had those small dreams." It should have stung more, but I just laughed it off. Back then, I thought she was just insecure. I didn't know she was already planting seeds. A month later, everything changed. Mom got a call, the kind you never expect. Richard's old business associate had been arrested, and suddenly we were important witnesses. I remember the FBI agent's voice echoing in our small kitchen. "Ma'am, for your safety, you'll need to enter protective custody immediately." Mom's lasagna sat half-eaten on the counter as we were rushed out of the house that night. I didn't even pack my diary. Betty, of course, acted like she was the hero. "Don't worry, I'll take care of Mom," she told me. "You just focus on surviving." But surviving meant disappearing in new names, new jobs, new lives. We were relocated to a quiet town in Oregon. I became Sarah. Mom became Akala. We lived in a small beige house on Hillcrest Lane. For a while, it almost felt normal. Until I started getting messages. The first one came to my new work email, a single line, "I know who you really are." Then came more. My coworkers started whispering, "Isn't that the girl from that mob case?" I once said in the break room. The next week, I was pulled into my boss's office. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sarah, maybe it's best if you take some time off," he said. I later found out he was getting bribes to leak my information. $2,000 per week paid through a third party. Betty's boyfriend. That's when the panic attack started. My chest would tighten until I couldn't breathe. My hands would go numb. I started carrying Mom's old rosary everywhere just to feel grounded. "You need help," Mom said gently one night. "Let's find you a therapist." I tried. I really did. But therapy only made me remember things I didn't want to. Like the time I woke up dizzy after dinner, my mouth tasting metallic. The doctor said it was low blood sugar. It wasn't. I'd later learn the truth, but that's for another part of this story. For now, I'll just say this. Betty started visiting again, under the guise of family support. She'd show up unannounced, bringing wine, always too interested in what I ate or drank. Mom trusted her. I didn't. The first red flag came the night she insisted we have a family toast. Mom smiled. I hesitated, but she said, "Don't be paranoid, Scarlett." 2 hours later, I woke up on the bathroom floor trembling, nauseous, and with a taste I'll never forget. When I looked in the mirror, my lips were pale blue. Betty was gone. And on the kitchen counter sat Richard's old leather wallet. Inside, a folded piece of paper with my real name on it and our Oregon address. That's when I realized. We weren't in witness protection anymore. We were targets. The next morning, Mom found me half-conscious on the couch. My skin was clammy, my vision blurred. I could hear her voice like it was coming through water. "Scarlett, honey, what happened? Did you take something?" I wanted to say Betty. I wanted to scream it. But my throat burned, and all that came out was a rasp. When I finally could speak again, I whispered, She drugged me." Mom froze. "Who?" "Betty," I croaked. "She left Richard's wallet with our real names inside." For a long time, Mom didn't move. Her face went blank as she sat down like someone had cut her strings. "That's impossible," she said quietly. Betty wouldn't have. But her voice faltered, because even she didn't believe it. We spent the next day in a kind of quiet terror. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart jump. I couldn't eat. The smell of hospital disinfectant still clung to me from the ER where they'd said I'd probably ingested a sedative. "No permanent damage," the doctor said, "but be careful with who you trust." Yeah. Easier said than done. I tried to focus on normal things, groceries, chores, anything. I still remember the total from that week's shopping trip, $89.03. I can't tell you why that number stuck in my brain, but it did. Maybe because that was the last normal receipt before everything spiraled. A few days later, my boss, the same one who told me to take time off the cold. "Sarah," he said, still using my alias, "I need you to come in for a meeting." I told him I wasn't ready. He insisted. "It's just paperwork." When I arrived, he wasn't alone. There was a man I didn't recognize, dark suit, slick hair, too confident. He smiled, showing teeth that didn't match his eyes. Nice to finally meet you, Miss Harper, he said, using my real last name. I froze. Where did you hear that? I demanded. He smirked. Let's just say some of your family connections are interesting. That's when it hit me. Betty had given him the information. The bribes. The leaks. I stormed out, shaking so badly I could barely start my car. The whole way home, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting headlights to follow. When I told Mom, she went silent. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding, she murmured, almost pleading. That was her defense mechanism, always making excuses for the abuser. She'd done it with Dad before, pretending he wasn't cheating, even when the proof was right there. Now she was doing it again, but this time the stakes were higher. The anxiety became unbearable. My heart raced even at night. I started sleeping with a chair wedged under my doorknob. I kept a go-bag packed by the door, cash, documents, and my old rosary. Therapy helped a little, but I was still unraveling. My therapist, Dr. Patel, told me, your nervous system has been rewired by trauma. You're not crazy, your body is trying to keep you alive. She was right. Every sound, every car door outside made my pulse spike. I'd get panic attacks so intense I couldn't work. My coworkers noticed. They started whispering. She's unstable, one said when they thought I couldn't hear. She lied about her past, another added. Soon people stopped sitting next to me in the break room. Invitations stopped coming. My manager avoided eye contact. It was like I had a contagious disease. I found out later why Betty had been contacting them, sending fake proof that I'd stolen medication from the pharmacy. She'd even emailed corporate pretending to be a concerned citizen. Within a week, I was fired. That night, I sat in the dark kitchen staring at the unpaid bills. My savings were gone. Mom's blood pressure meds were running low. She tried to comfort me, saying, we'll get through this, Scarlett, we always do. But she didn't know what I knew, that Betty wasn't just trying to ruin me. She wanted to expose us. A few weeks later, I got another anonymous message. Your mother isn't safe. They're coming for her next. I showed it to Mom, expecting her to panic. Instead, she just sighed. Betty's been under a lot of stress, she said. That broke me. Mom, she's not under stress, she's trying to get us. I shouted. You're still defending her after everything? Her eyes filled with tears. She's my husband's daughter, Scarlett. I can't just believe she's a monster. But she was. Because that same night, someone broke into our shed. The next morning, we found tire tracks in the mud and our back fence cut open. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I started having nightmares of Betty's smile morphing into something inhuman, whispering my name in the dark. I kept hearing her voice saying, you always had small dreamed. Now I knew what she meant. She'd been planning this for years. And when I finally found the bottle in her purse during her next visit, the one labeled with a hospital's pharmacy tag, that's when I started connecting the dots. She'd been drugging me. For years. When I confronted Betty, she didn't flinch. She just smiled with that same slow, reptilian grin that made my stomach twist. I found the pills in your purse, I said. My voice was shaking, but I forced the words out. The same ones the hospital tested me for. She tilted her head, pretending to think. Oh, those, they're just anti-anxiety meds. Maybe you should try some, you look like you need them. My hands clenched so hard my nails cut into my palms. You've been drugging me, Betty, don't lie. She laughed. Please, you really think you're that important? You've always been so dramatic, Scarlett. That word Scarlett hit like a knife. She wasn't supposed to use my real name. Not here. Not in this house. I glanced at Mom, who was frozen in the doorway. Mom, tell her to leave. But Mom's eyes were full of confusion, torn between us. Betty, please, she whispered. Did you do this? Betty just shrugged, picked up her purse, and walked out like she'd just finished a dinner party. That was the last time she came in peace. 3 days later, the agents from the Witness Protection Program showed up. 2 of them. They didn't look like the ones who relocated us the first time. Their badges were real, but their tone wasn't. Miss Harper, one of them said, we're doing a routine welfare check. Can we come in? I hesitated. I thought our handler was Agent Cooper. He smiled tightly. He was reassigned. Every instinct screamed no. But Mom let them in. They asked strange questions. How often did we leave the house? Did we have any new neighbors? Do we still have contact with Betty Stunt? When I said no, one of them scribbled something down. Then the taller one leaned closer. You should be careful, ma'am. We've had leaks before. After they left, I called our old handler. The line was dead. The panic came back full force. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. My anxiety attacks were constant and my body vibrating like it was trapped in danger mode. Dr. Patel said my trauma responses were hypervigilant, that I'd been rewired by chronic betrayal. You've lived in fight or flight too long, Scarlett, she told me gently. Your brain can't tell what's real anymore. But I knew what was real. Because the next week I got proof. I was sorting through the mail when I found an envelope with no return address. Inside, a USB drive and a single photo of Betty shaking hands with a man I recognized from Richard's old trial. He wasn't just a criminal. He was the criminal, the one we testified against before witness protection. And the footage on that USB? It showed Betty meeting him at a motel, exchanging documents and cash. My blood ran cold. I brought it to the local police. The officer barely glanced at it before saying, "We'll look into it." They didn't. A week later, I was fired from my new part-time job. Reason: unreliable behavior. My boss, the one who'd once defended me, couldn't meet my eyes. When I pressed him, he said quietly, "Scarlett, someone sent the company HR files about you, about your real identity." Betty again. And that's when the social isolation became total. My coworkers crossed the street to avoid me. Neighbors whispered. Someone graffitied "snitched" on our garage door. I wasn't safe anywhere. Then came the second betrayal. Mom's cousin, Aunt Lorna, the one who always acted like she understood, called me one night, voice trembling. "Scarlett, you need to drop this. Betty's dangerous." "I know that," I said. "That's why I'm trying to stop her." "No, you don't understand," she whispered. "I've been helping her." The air left my lungs. "What?" "She said you were unstable," Lorna continued. "That you were a threat to the family's safety. She paid my mortgage to keep quiet." I dropped the phone. Literally dropped it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every piece of support I thought I had to go on. That night, I packed a bag and drove until sunrise. Somewhere around the Washington border, I pulled into a rest stop and just broke. I screamed into my hands until my throat burned. I thought about myself, just to stop the noise in my head. But then I remembered Mom, her shaking hands, her lasagna bubbling in the oven, the way she said, "We always get through it." So I turned the car around. When I got home, Mom was sitting on the floor of the kitchen, clutching Richard's old leather wallet, the same one Betty had used to expose us. She was crying. "Scarlett," she said, "you were right. I checked the bank records. Betty's been taking money from his estate for years." That's when we decided. We were done running. We were going to expose her. And we were going to do it somewhere she couldn't control the story. Somewhere public. Like at my child's birthday party. It was October 14th, 3:00 p.m., my daughter's 6th birthday. The backyard was decorated with pink balloons and a banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Lily." The smell of Mom's homemade lasagna still lingered from lunch, a bittersweet comfort. Guests were arriving, laughing, and aware of the storm about to hit. Betty had been invited under the guise of family. Mom hesitated but agreed, thinking it might finally be safe to reconnect. I, however, had spent the last week preparing. Evidence printed. Photos organized. The USB drive with everything she had done in her lives, the drugs, the bribes, backed up on my phone. I wore gloves so she wouldn't touch anything. My heart pounded, palms sweaty. Anxiety claws in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe. Dr. Patel's voice echoed in my mind. "Scarlett, the goal is control. Do you have control now?" Betty writhed, perfectly polished, hair shiny, a fake smile plastered across her face. "Scarlett, darling," she cooed. "I can't believe Lily's growing so fast." I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said, voice steady. "She's healthy, which reminds me we need to talk." Guests exchanged puzzled glances. Lily ran around the yard, unaware, squealing with joy. I motioned to Mom. She gave me a civil nod, her way of saying, "We've got this." I pulled out the first piece of evidence, a photo of Betty handing cash to the man from Richard's old trial. "Care to explain this?" I said. Her smile faltered. "What is that?" I held up my phone. "This, Betty, every lie, every bribe, every time you drugged me." The backyard went silent. A few parents whispered to each other. My child stopped running and stared at me, wide-eyed. "You've been poisoning me for years," I said, voice rising. "And not just me, Mom, our lives, our safety. You've betrayed every single person in this family." Betty laughed nervously. "Scarlett, don't be ridiculous." I stepped closer. "I have proof, and the police are on their way." Her fake composure cracked. You can't." Suddenly, she lunged toward me, trying to grab my phone. I twisted away, knocking over a table with cupcakes and juice boxes. Guests screamed. Lily started crying. Balloons popped underfoot. Mom grabbed a chair to block her. "Stay away from my daughter," she shouted. Chaos erupted. Chairs toppled. Birthday presents scattered across the grass. Betty screamed, "You're ruining everything." By then, neighbors had called the police. Within 10 minutes, uniformed officers arrived, separating us. Betty struggled and yelled, but the evidence was irrefutable. They cuffed her, reading her rights. She glared at me, full of venom, as if she could somehow punish me for exposing her. After she was taken away, I sank onto the grass, shaking. Lily ran into my arms, tears wet on her cheeks. I held her tight. "Mom," I whispered, finally allowing myself to breathe. "We're safe now." Mom hugged me, trembling. "I should have believed you sooner," she admitted. "I'm so sorry, Scarlett." I nodded, exhausted. "It's not your fault. None of it was ours." Even in that moment of victory, the fallout was immediate. News spread through the neighborhood. People whispered about the dramatic scene at the birthday party. Some friends refused to come near us again. My reputation, already battered by Betty's lies, was permanently tainted. I went to Dr. Patel the next day. "You did exactly what you needed to do," she said. but expect emotional aftermath. Trauma doesn't disappear because the threat is gone. I nodded. My anxiety attacks didn't vanish overnight. Nightmares came, reminding me of how close we had been to real harm. But for the first time, I felt a spark of control, a small glimmer of power. That night, I sat in the empty kitchen, the smell of lasagna still lingering, flipping through Richard's old leather wallet one last time. I realized something profound. I would have done anything for Betty, and she used it to destroy me. But I survived. Mom survived. Lily survived. And more than that, I discovered I wasn't alone. The USB drive had files showing that Betty had done this to others before. Families ruined, careers destroyed, trust shattered. I finally understood the scope of her manipulation. I made a vow I would reclaim my life. Not tomorrow, not next week, but now. I forgave myself. I forgave Mom for hesitating. I forgave my past for the helplessness I had felt. None of this was my fault. The day after the birthday chaos, silence settled over our home like a heavy, suffocating blanket. But inside me, the storm raged. My hands trembled constantly, and every time the phone rang, my chest tightened as though my heart was trying to escape. The nightmares hadn't stopped, vivid, terrifying, relentless. Betty's voice echoed in my head, her smirk flashing in the darkness. Sometimes I woke up drenched in sweat, convinced I'd been drugged again. Mom tried to comfort me. "Scarlett, you did the right thing," she said, but even her words felt hollow. She'd stopped cooking much, even her lasagna, which had always been a taste of home. I noticed a faint smell of disinfectant in the kitchen, a leftover from when the ER staff treated me months ago, and I gagged. Memories I wanted buried were rising again. Work had become impossible. My anxiety attacks were so frequent that I couldn't hold a job. Even small tasks, like going to the grocery store, were unbearable. I remember one trip vividly. I stood in the aisle, staring at the checkout screen, $89.03, clutching my old leather wallet. The cashier gave me a sympathetic look, murmuring, "Are you okay, Sarah?" I forced a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. Every stranger felt like a potential threat. My social life was gone. Friends I once trusted whispered behind my back, "She's unstable," someone said at a party I never should have gone to. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. It was humiliating being treated like I was contagious. Even within my own family, Aunt Lorna had kept her distance, making excuses for Betty's past behavior. I started therapy more intensively. Dr. Patel recommended EMDR to process the trauma, cognitive behavioral therapy to regain control over my thoughts, and grounding techniques to cope with panic attacks. But the sessions weren't magic. One afternoon, lying on the therapy couch, I whispered, "I feel like I'm broken, like I'll never be normal again." She took my hand. "You're not broken, Scarlett. You were rewritten by someone else's lies. Your job now is to reclaim yourself." But reclaiming myself was agonizing. I couldn't sleep alone. Every creak, every shadow, every sudden sound made me jump. Panic attacks came at random. Grocery aisles, work emails, the smell of disinfectant. I felt trapped in a body that didn't belong to me. Financially, I was wrecked. The loss of my job, coupled with Betty's interference in Mom's accounts, left us scraping by. Bills piled up. The back fence needed repair after the break-in, and my savings were gone. Every small expense of $12 for milk, $35 for gas felt like a mountain. I had nightmares of being evicted, of Lily being exposed to danger. Even our community treated us as damaged. At the grocery store, whispers followed me. "That's the witness protection girl," someone hissed. "Her stepsister messed everything up." The shame was suffocating. I wanted to disappear. I remember one night, curled on the kitchen floor, hugging my knees, sobbing until my throat ached. Mom sat nearby, silent and sure how to comfort me. I held Richard's old leather wallet, now empty of cash, but still filled with evidence and memories. I whispered to myself, to the universe, "I can't do this anymore." I had reached my rock bottom. A state where everything I had been through, the betrayal, the lies, the isolation, culminated in a feeling that life itself had turned against me. Every instinct told me to hide forever. But even at my lowest, there was a tiny ember, the knowledge that I had survived Betty. That ember became my anchor. I started small, walks in the neighborhood, holding Lily's hand tightly, breathing through panic attacks. Grocery trips became practice in bravery. I slowly re-engaged with therapy, taking notes, practicing grounding techniques, tracking my triggers. Every day was painstaking, but every small victory reminded me that I still had control over my life. I began to rebuild trust with Mom, who finally admitted, "I see now how wrong I was to excuse her." We laughed sometimes, in short bursts, like practicing a muscle we'd forgotten existed. And I started teaching Lily that it was okay to set boundaries, that truth and safety mattered, and that being brave didn't always mean being fearless. Sometimes it meant facing the people who hurt you. Even at rock bottom, I started to understand that Betty's actions, the public shame, the isolation, the panic, and the nightmares, and none of it defined me. My life wasn't over. My story wasn't finished. I was just beginning to write the chapters where I chose myself. Healing didn't arrive in a cinematic moment. It came in fragments of tiny, unremarkable decisions that added up over time. Waking up and choosing to get dressed. Answering Dr. Patel's text. Cooking again, even when my hands shook while slicing tomatoes. It was the slow unlearning of fear. The hardest part was forgiving myself. For not leaving sooner. For doubting my instincts. For believing Betty could be saved. Every therapy session peeled back layers of guilt I didn't even know I carried. Dr. Patel told me one afternoon, "You didn't fail, you survive. There's a difference." And for the first time, I believed her. The police investigation into Betty stretched for months. She faced multiple charges of tampering, fraud, obstruction, and reckless endangerment. I didn't attend the hearings. Mom did. She came home after one of them, eyes red but voice steady. She didn't even look sorry, she said. That night, we ate Mom's lasagna again, the first time she'd made it since everything collapsed. The smell filled the kitchen, comforting, nostalgic. I took a bite and almost cried. It tasted like childhood, like safety returning in small doses. Lily clapped her hands. Grandma's lasagna is the best, she declared, sauce smeared across her face. For the first time in years, I laughed without feeling guilt. I began volunteering at a crisis center for women who'd escaped manipulation and coercive relationships. Sitting across from them, I saw myself through the fear, the confusion, the guilt that doesn't fade easily. But telling my story piece by piece turned the pain into something useful. One woman, eyes swollen from crying, whispered, "How did you ever trust anyone again?" I paused. I didn't, not at first, but trust doesn't have to mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing to believe you deserve better. That line stayed with me. It became my mantra. Gradually, the panic attacks lessened. Not gone, just quieter. I still had nightmares, but they no longer ruled me. I'd wake up, take a deep breath, and remind myself, she can't hurt you anymore. I also reconnected with old coworkers, the ones who had believed the lies. Some apologized. Others didn't. But the reactions no longer defined me. I realized the whispers had lost their power. People would always talk. The only voice that mattered was my own. Even the smell of disinfectant, once the trigger, began to fade. It became just another smell and not a symbol of hospitals and fear. I started saving again, small amounts at first. $20 here, $30 there. Eventually, enough to move to a new home, one that wasn't tinted by memory. Mom helped me paint the walls a warm cream color. Lily picked her own pink curtains. One night, as I tucked her in, she said, "Mommy, are the bad people gone now?" I kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby, they can't find us anymore." "Good," she murmured sleepily. "You're the bravest person I know." Her words shattered something inside me in a good way. I realized bravery wasn't about never breaking. It was about rebuilding every single time you did. On June 3rd, exactly 1 year after the funeral that started it all, I visited the cemetery again. The same quiet air, the same damp soil. This time, there was no smoke across from me, just peace. I left a single white rose on the grave and whispered, "I forgive myself." Because that's what healing really was, not forgetting, not pretending it didn't happen, but choosing to stop carrying the blame. I forgave myself for believing Betty. I forgave myself for breaking. I forgave myself for surviving the way I had to. And in that forgiveness, something inside me unclenched. These days, I work part-time at a trauma recovery nonprofit. I write articles about emotional manipulation, about how doesn't always come with bruises. I tell survivors that being rewritten by trauma doesn't mean they can't take the pen back. Mom's health stabilized. She laughs again. She plants tomatoes in the backyard, humming under her breath. Lily just started first grade. She tells everyone her mom helps people feel safe. And as for me, I finally feel like myself again. When I look in the mirror, I don't see a victim. I see someone who crawled through hell and came out whole. The scars remained, sure. But they're proof that I lived. That I fought. That I won. I'll never get back the years Betty stole, the trust, the peace, the sleep, but I have something better, clarity. I know now that none of it was my fault. Not the betrayal, not the fear, not the destruction that followed. I was manipulated. I was gaslit. I was broken. But I am still here. And I finally understand survival is revenge.